Napoleon Bonaparte, one of the greatest military commanders and strategists in history, rising from his humble beginnings to become French emperor, conqueror, and finally a life of exile on a remote Atlantic island. Welcome, my name is Peter. In this interview, we will learn about the life of this extraordinary man and experience the ecstasy of his victories and the agony of his defeats in this one-of-a-kind interview with the legend himself, Napoleon Bonaparte.
Pierre, bonjour mon ami. I'm pleased to be here speaking with you this lovely morning.
Hello, Napoleon. I am grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you. So we are here on the remote island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. You've experienced one of the most historic downfalls of any historical leader that brought you to this place of exile after a long and successful career as a military general and political leader. Throughout this discussion, we'll come to understand how you went from the most powerful man in Europe to a life of exile. For now, I'd like to start with your early career. You've been characterized as an ambitious military genius and political strategist. Is that a fair assessment, that you entered your career feeling a pronounced sense of ambition and a strong belief in your exceptional military and political talents?
Well, that is true. When I was a youth, I entered military school at Brienne and felt a genuine sense of contentment. My intellectual faculties were awakening, and I was anxious for knowledge and progress. I voraciously consumed books which garnered admiration and envy. I was aware of my abilities, and I took pleasure in my sense of superiority. Early in my studies, I recognized the impact of an army. Battles, like any dramatic performances, have distinct phases, a beginning, middle, and end. The outcome hinges on a moment of insight. Lucky generals are those who seize opportunities. Even a single battalion decides the day. A general's presence is vital. They are the essence of an army. It wasn't just the Roman army that conquered Gaul, but Caesar. The Carthaginians didn't strike fear into the Roman Republic at Rome's gates. It was Hannibal. The Macedonian army didn't reach the Indus. It was Alexander. The Prussian army didn't solely defend Prussia against three powerful European forces for 7 years. It was Frederick the Great. Gathering forces, taking action, and doing so with unwavering determination to achieve glory. These are the fundamental principles of successful military strategy that consistently ensured my success. Death is nothing, but to live defeated and ingloriously is to die every day. I am a born soldier. That is my calling and lifelong habit. I've assumed command at every opportunity. At the siege of Toulon at the age of 23, during the events of the Vendémiaire in Paris. The soldiers of the Army of Italy rallied around me from the moment I joined their ranks. I made great sacrifices for the Republic. I served with distinction at the siege of Toulon and earned my share of laurels at the capture of Saoggio. I can no longer obey. I have tasted command and I cannot give it up. Leadership and command are in my nature, for I was born that way.
From a young age, Napoleon displayed exceptional ambition and a distinct blend of willpower, intellect, and physical vigor. His heightened sense of self might be attributed to what some call a Napoleon complex, which is characterized by a domineering or aggressive attitude, often seen as compensation for perceived physical or social shortcomings. A common misconception links Napoleon's alleged inferiority complex to his short stature, despite him being of average height for his time. This notion primarily originated from British propaganda efforts aimed at belittling him. In 1803, British newspapers portrayed him as a small, irritable man. In reality, Napoleon's inferiority complex began during his childhood, when he grew more assertive and sought more approval from his parents due to the attention lavished on his older brother, Joseph. Early schooling brought bullying, which fueled his development of a domineering personality. Throughout this interview, we'll see many examples of this personality trait. The widespread perception of a Napoleon complex proved to be a successful propaganda campaign by Napoleon's enemy, the British. With his burgeoning ego and inferiority complex, Napoleon sought to stand up against this, his greatest of rivals, the British Empire. The British were certainly one of your greatest adversaries. Your campaigns in Syria and Egypt were ultimately aimed at undermining British power in the region. This military operation was also a critical moment in your career. What can you tell us about these campaigns?
At that time I realized that really to destroy England we must seize Egypt. I was deeply compelled to go to the Orient. All great reputations have been won there. If I stayed in Europe, my reputation would soon have been gone, as I was almost forgotten. The Orient awaited me. My vision for that land was to raise and arm all Syria, to march on Damascus and Aleppo. I intended to swell my ranks with all the discontented and to announce the end of slavery and of the tyrannous rule of the Pashas. If I were to reach Constantinople, it would be at the head of an armed multitude. I envisioned the creation of a new and powerful Eastern Empire. To make this vision a reality, I set out for the pillage of Egypt. At dawn on July 21st, 1798, we met Egypt's advance guard, which we drove back from village to village. In front of my soldiers, one of the most fantastic sights I have ever beheld, the Sphinx and Great Pyramids. 40 centuries of the most remarkable history known to man stood before us. The instant Murad Bey noticed Louis Desai's movement, he launched an attack. One of his boldest commanders led a cavalry force charging swiftly toward our two divisions. We allowed them to approach within 50 paces before unleashing a devastating barrage of bullets that inflicted heavy casualties. The mistake was theirs. They advanced into the gaps between our divisions where they were trapped in a crossfire that completed their defeat. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. Upon our victory, I sent communication to the sheiks and notables of Cairo. I hold in my hands a copy of the official statement. It goes as follows. You will judge of my sentiments by the proclamation which I enclose. Yesterday the Mamelukes were for the most part killed or made prisoners, and I am in pursuit of the few who survive. Send over to this bank what boats you have, and a deputation to formally declare your submission at my hands, and your official surrender to the armies of the mighty French. Be without uneasiness, for no one could wish you better than I. I was then 29 years old, and I anticipated that by the time I turn 35, I shall have conquered my way to India, provided all went as planned. In Jaffa, after much fighting, I summoned the governor to surrender. He did not reply with words, but instead responded by beheading my messenger. At 7, on the 8th of March 1799, we opened fire, and by 1 in the afternoon, I deemed the breach in the defences passable. At 5, we were in possession of the city, which was sacked for 24 hours and given up to all the horrors of war, which never appeared more hideous.
So now you had to make the transition from conqueror to governor of that territory. What was it like governing your newly conquered subjects?
Governing the Turks demanded firmness. While we initially acted with restraint to counter the reputation of terror that preceded us, it quickly became more effective to adopt an authoritative tone. I therefore ordered 5 or 6 heads to be cut off daily in Cairo. This ensured obedience among those people, as their obedience was rooted in fear. You must understand, Peter, men are more easily governed by their vices than through their virtues. My object was ultimately accomplished. Egypt called me. I colonized that country, and in Cairo I founded an institute for science and art, where all French Army general officers were eligible to attend. The chief object of this society was to develop and encourage learning in Egypt.
1 year after its establishment, this scientific institution discovered the Rosetta Stone. This marked a significant milestone in decoding ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and the subsequent emergence of the scientific study of ancient Egypt, known as Egyptology. While in Egypt, Bonaparte kept himself updated on European developments. Learning of France's setbacks in the War of the Second Coalition, he sensed the Republic's instability. Seizing this opportunity, on August 24, 1799, he departed for France. He formed alliances, and on November 9, 1799, they executed a coup d'état, toppling the Directory which governed the French Republic and dissolving the Council of 500, the lower house of the French legislature.
I acquired English gazettes dated to June 10th. I learned that on March 13th, France declared war on the Emperor. Believing that there were no significant hostile fleets in the Mediterranean, I promptly set out for Rosetta. I ordered General Kleber to assume command of the army there. Driven by the interests of our nation, my duty, and the remarkable unfolding events, I was convinced to return to Europe. Upon my return to France on October 15, 1799, my resolve was to put an end to the reign of chatter. To undermine a representative government is a criminal proposition in this age of enlightenment and liberty. The army approached me, which prompted me to appear before the legislative body. I confronted them with pointed inquiries. What have you done with France, which I left in your hands so prosperous? I left you peace, I find war. I left you victories, I find defeats. I left you millions, I find beggary. This state of affairs must cease. For 2 years past, the Republic had been badly governed. The Council of 500 was in disarray, and only the Council of Ancients remained. It was from the Council of Ancients that I derived my powers. The people wanted a republic founded on real liberty, on civil liberty, on national representation. Liberty, victory, and peace restored to the French Republic the rank she formerly held in Europe. The wisdom of the citizens framed the decree which propelled me to power. Our arms carried it out. The Constitution. It was disregarded by both the government and the citizens. After my return, I was surrounded by intrigues. Every faction approached me, and many patriots urged me to set aside the Constitution. It was half ruined and could not save the cause of liberty. All parties came to me, told me their plans, revealed their secrets, and asked for my support. But I adamantly refused to be the tool of any party.
The new constitution solidified Napoleon's authority as first consul and received overwhelming approval through a direct popular vote. While the constitution maintained the facade of a republic, it effectively established a dictatorship with Napoleon in charge. His seizure of power is generally considered the end of the French Revolution. As first consul of France, Napoleon Bonaparte continued to exert his influence both within France and on the international stage. Between 1800 and 1803, Napoleon's leadership stabilized France and laid the groundwork for his later ascension to emperor. His reforms, including the Napoleonic Code and the Concordat, aimed to bring structure and order to post-revolutionary France. Your civil code proved to be a major success in France and served as a model for many legal systems worldwide. Can you elaborate on some of the specific aspects of the civil code?
In an effort to build my nation, I hastened to regulate by means of codes the principal fields of legislation. The civil code, though imperfect, has done much good. Everyone is familiar now with the first principles of conduct and governs his property and business accordingly. The legal code gave equal rights to all citizens, irrespective of their social or economic status. It protected private property rights, recognized the freedom to enter into contracts, and addressed marriage, divorce, and family issues with an emphasis on male authority within the family. It established rules for inheritance and personal rights, such as freedom of religion and speech within specified limits. The code provided clear legal procedures, defined crimes and their penalties, regulated labor and trade, organized the judicial system, and introduced the presumption of innocence and required proof of guilt. The civil and commercial codes, the criminal code, and the code of procedure were met with success. The civil code is the code of the century. Its provisions not only preach toleration but organize it. Toleration, the greatest privilege of man. Liberty is the need of only a small class, endowed by nature with higher faculties than common men. Equality, on the contrary, is what appeals to the mass.
The Napoleonic Code significantly reformed and modernized the French legal system, enhancing clarity, fairness, and uniformity while making it more accessible and equitable compared to the earlier legal structures. On the diplomatic front, his negotiations and treaties brought temporary peace to the European continent, and he was involved with Thomas Jefferson in the sale of the Louisiana Purchase to the United States for $15 million. By the end of 1804, Napoleon had amassed enough power and authority to crown himself Emperor of France.
I ascend the throne to which the unanimous votes of the Senate, the people, and the army have called me, my heart full of the destinies of a nation which I, from the battlefield, first proclaimed great. My descendants will long fill this throne. I had long dreamt of that moment, leading to the most profound feeling of déjà vu. I was acutely aware that my self-coronation was an audacious act, and its success was not guaranteed. I recalled my rise from a young Corsican soldier to a military general, and then the first consul of France. It was in that moment of self-reflection that the crown was placed atop my head. At last, I was Emperor of France. That day I felt an overwhelming mix of emotions. Pride surged within me, as this was a culmination of my relentless ambition and pursuit of power. Yet, beneath the surface, I felt the gravity of history and carried an immense weight of responsibility, with millions of lives in my hands. I swear that I will govern with the sole purpose of securing the interests, the happiness, and the glory of the French people.
Between 1804 and 1812, Emperor Napoleon engaged in many wars and historic battles. The wars of the Third, Fourth, and Fifth Coalitions involved many European powers allied together against Napoleon and the French. The Third Coalition's defeat led to the dissolution of the 1,000-year-old Holy Roman Empire, with the Austrian Empire losing significant territorial holdings as well. Prussia lost substantial territory, and the Russian Empire aligned itself with France after the defeat of the Fourth Coalition, while the War of the Fifth Coalition forced Austria to cede territory to France and its allies. Napoleon experienced a high level of success during these wars. He exhibited remarkable military prowess and achieved significant victories and strategic gains. Napoleon expanded his influence, asserted his dominance, and solidified his control over Central Europe. The War of the Sixth Coalition began with Napoleon's invasion of Russia in 1812. Despite early successes, Napoleon suffered one of his most ruinous defeats. Although he captured Moscow, he was ultimately forced to retreat. Your retreat from Russia is considered one of the most disastrous episodes in military history. Many historians have debated the reasons for the failure of this campaign. The Russians' scorched earth policy certainly contributed. The harsh Russian winter also played a role. You were there. You led this historic campaign. Tell us what factors influenced your decision to retreat.
I penetrated into Russia. En route to the capital, the French armies were constantly victorious in every battle. The Russian armies were not once able to hold their ground against our eagles. Moscow fell into our hands. After the frontiers of Russia had been pierced and the weakness of her armies had been exposed, masses of Tatars, who had been called to defend their vast empire, directed their hostilities toward itself and turned against their own homeland. In the space of a few weeks, they burned down more than 4,000 of their most prosperous villages, more than 50 of their finest cities, all under the pretext of retarding our advance and surrounding us with a barren wasteland. We triumphed over these obstacles. Moscow fell into our hands. Even the fire of Moscow, which in just 4 days destroyed 40 generations of their own wealth and achievements, did not affect the security of our position. The single most challenging obstacle, in my estimation, was the excessive and premature severity of winter. It bore down our army in a frightful calamity. In the matter of a few nights, all was changed. My successes turned to defeats. My remarkable gains turned to devastating losses. I needed great resources to face all the demands imposed on me by those circumstances. But I did not impose any fresh burdens on my people. The harsh winter revealed the strength and grandeur of our empire. It was gratifying to witness the people of Italy, Holland, and our newly acquired territories aligning with the French, demonstrating their shared hope and interest in the success and unity of my great empire. My spirit would have been broken under such circumstances if I allowed myself to think of anything but the interests, the glory, and the future of my people.
The failure of his Russian campaign was a pivotal moment in Napoleon's downfall, as it demonstrated that he was not invincible and marked the beginning of a series of defeats against the Sixth Coalition. This prompted his abdication from the thrones of France and Italy. He was subsequently exiled to Elba, only to stage a dramatic return to fight in the War of the Seventh Coalition, otherwise known as the 100 Days. Now we'll move on to the War of the Seventh Coalition, in particular the Battle of Waterloo. This was perhaps the most consequential battle of your military career. Reflecting on that battle, what strategic decisions do you believe contributed to the outcome? And are there aspects you would have approached differently in hindsight?
If only the Battle of Waterloo could be done over again. An extraordinary, unprecedented, and inconceivable concurrence of fatal events unfolded, leading to 3 missed opportunities for success within a week. Betrayal by a traitor prevented an early annihilation of the enemy, and shortcomings in both the left guard at Ligny and the right guard at Waterloo thwarted potential victories. Wellington is principally recognized for the victory at the Battle of Waterloo, but not for his own conduct as a general, for it was the English soldiers who fought with the greatest obstinacy and courage. The outcome of the battle will not, in the eyes of the historian, reflect any credit on Lord Wellington as a general. I see 2 principal causes that lost me the battle. My Field Marshal Grouchy failed to control the Prussians, and he initiated a premature cavalry charge. Had it not been for the imbecility of Grouchy, I would have gained the day. My men of 1815 were not the same as those of 1792. My generals were now faint-hearted men. I needed a good officer to command my guard. If you want a thing done well, do it yourself. The responsibility for my commanders was mine alone. In hindsight, I should have approached my actions in a different manner. Staying with the battalion of my guard on the left of the high road could have allowed me to rally the cavalry. Having recognized the Prussian superiority in previous battles, perhaps an earlier retreat would have been wiser. Waiting another month before starting the campaign could have bolstered my army's consistency. And finally, if I had mounted grenadiers in reserve, it might have altered the situation. By 1815, it became evident that I had let go of the hope for ultimate success and lost my initial confidence. It is possible that I realized I was aging beyond the typical favorable period in life, or perhaps I felt the spell over my miraculous career had broken. Fortune no longer favored me, and every advantage gained during this time was promptly followed by a reversal of fortune.
In retrospect, do you have any regrets or believe you made any strategic mistakes in your career?
My regrets are not for myself, but for France. But it was fate, destiny, that made me lose those battles. Waterloo, although a disaster, was not a strategic error. Mistakes occurred during the battle itself, but my decision to engage in it was justified. It was a chance for redemption after the losses in the War of the Sixth Coalition, my final opportunity to reclaim former glory, and I had to take it. The Russian campaign ended in failure as well, something I experienced before, but no other previous defeat was as catastrophic. I hold the conviction that when a campaign ultimately fails, the very fact of its failure is indicative of a strategic error. My own opinion is that I ought to have died at Waterloo, perhaps a little earlier. Had I died at Moscow, I should probably have had the reputation of the greatest conqueror ever known. But the smiles of fortune were at an end. The irony is that when a man seeks death the most, he cannot find it. Men were killed around me, before me, behind me, everywhere surrounding me, but no bullet for me.
Once defeated in the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon fled to Paris, only to find that the people and the government had turned against him. He abdicated from the throne a second time and was again sent into exile, this time on the remote island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean. The result of the Battle of Waterloo explains why you are now here, living in exile on St. Helena. Do you wish to go back to France? You returned from exile once already. Do you have any hope to return to power in the future?
Well, I am better today, but nonetheless I feel the end drawing near. I am very weak. My trembling legs will hardly hold me up. What a pleasant thing is rest. My bed has become a place of happiness for me. I would not exchange it for all the thrones of the universe that I once occupied. What a change! How I have fallen. I, whose activity knew no bounds, whose mind never slumbered. I am plunged into a stupor. I have to make an effort to raise my eyelids. Peter, my friend, you have shared my exile. You will be faithful to my memory. You will do nothing to injure it.
After his downfall, the Congress of Vienna convened to redraw the map of Europe, restructure the political order, and create a long-term plan for peace in Europe. Napoleon Bonaparte's impact on the world is far-reaching. He played a role in ending the Holy Roman Empire. His 1808 invasion of Spain weakened the country, contributing to Spain's loss of control over its American colonies and sparking various Latin American independence movements. In Poland, he's viewed favorably for supporting independence, opposing Russia, introducing legal reforms, abolishing serfdom, and modernizing Poland's administration. Controversy surrounds his involvement in the Haitian Revolution and the controversial decision to reintroduce slavery in France's overseas colonies. He was instrumental in bringing liberal reforms to the forefront of European nations. His civil code has had long-lasting effects in the lands he conquered and is still used as the foundational set of legal codes in many countries throughout the world. His overly aggressive military behavior, unchecked ambitions and relentless pursuit of personal glory propelled himself and his empire to extraordinary heights. Ironically, these same factors led to his downfall. Arguably the most important lesson to be learned from Napoleon is a lesson that he never understood. That the very same excessive ambition that drives progress can also result in one's own demise. His life serves as a prime example of the limits of endless personal ambition. Mr. Bonaparte, do you have any final thoughts to share with me and our audience, specifically regarding how you will be remembered in future generations?
Everything on earth is soon forgotten, except the opinion we leave imprinted on history. I have given up the idea of the grand empire, of which in 15 years I had only laid the foundations. Henceforth, the happiness and consolidation of the French Empire will be the object of all my thoughts. I thank my good city of Paris for its sentiments. My will and my duties are those of the French people. My honor, my glory, my happiness can be none other than the honor, the glory, and the happiness of France. My true glory is not to have won 40 battles. Waterloo will erase the memory of so many victories. But what will live forever is my civil code. I have no fear whatever about my fame. Posterity will do me justice. The truth will be known, and the good I have done will be compared with the faults I have committed. I am not uneasy as to the result. Had I succeeded, I would have died with the reputation of the greatest man that ever existed. As it is, although I have failed, I shall be considered as an extraordinary man. My elevation was unparalleled because unaccompanied by crime. I have fought 50 pitched battles, almost all of which I have won. I have framed and carried into effect a code of laws that will bear my name to the most distant posterity. I raised myself from nothing to be the most powerful monarch in the world. Europe was at my feet.